สวัสดีค่ะ Hello and welcome to a special episode of You Too Can Learn Thai. Recently, I was interviewed on the Bangkok podcast, which is a podcast about expats in Thailand and all things related to Thailand. Greg and I talked about learning a foreign language as an adult. Then we talked about how I designed my advanced Thai classes and some interesting cultural tidbits. Have a listen to this episode and don't forget to check out the Bangkok podcast. Enjoy!
So one of the things that you and I were talking about in our leading up to this, we were discussing how people learn languages, like how our brains learn languages.
Mm-hmm.
And something you said that I found quite interesting was how babies learn languages. And we always talk about how kids can just, their brains are sponges. They just suck up everything. And that's called the critical period, where babies can't do much of anything because babies are kind of useless. So they just sit there and listen, and that's all they do. But adults can't really do that. So how do adults compensate for that? Can adults compensate for that?
First of all, for the critical period, there is a hypothesis for that in terms of like the theoretical research, but we don't have a very firm conclusion yet because most of the data is like observational. We can't assign children to different groups and let them start speaking language at different time. So basically what we notice is that the baby, they do pretty well and they can be native if you start early on. And if you delay your start of learning a language until probably somehow like puberty, then it's very difficult for you to reach the native level. But having said that, there are some things that adults seem to do pretty good, like probably not as native as children can do, but adults can be quite good at learning language as well. The first one, though, is the speed of acquisition or speed of learning. Like if you just said that children like need a year or two just to listen and absorb the language. But for adults, you can just go to a class for 1 hour and you can start speaking right away. So this is kind of like the cognitive difference between children and adults, right? So I would say adults have kind of like a head start in terms of learning. So you can absorb thing or learn thing pretty fast when input is limited. And the advantages of children is they accumulate a lot. And at some point, there is like an explosion, exponential rise in their capabilities.
I guess adults are able to contextualize language. You know, like babies might learn the word mamuang and manam, but they wouldn't know the difference between those two things. But even though adults might take, some time to learn those two things, mango and river, then they would be able to contextualize them together. Oh, mamuang belongs in the ponomai category and manam belongs in the category with boats and bridges and things like that. So they have a bit more of an ability to connect those words with other words, which babies don't have.
Yeah, I agree. It's like because adults have more developed mind in some parts. It's just like, some theories say that adults are better in terms of pragmatics as well. So pragmatics is like the interaction, how language is connected to interaction between the speaker and the listener. Just like if you try to explain why, for example, English speaking people, when you can't hear something clearly, then you probably say like, I'm sorry or pardon me, which sound quite polite, but for Thai people in Thai, we usually say "arai na," which is translated as "what." So for English speaking people to hear Thai people saying like "what," it will sound a little not so polite. And if you explain that,
that's really funny because my son says the same thing. My son is 6.5, and when he there's certain things that in Thai that he's better at. I think he's stronger in English, but like if he doesn't hear you, instead of saying pardon or what, he'll go, what? And I have to tell him, like, I mean, in Thai, arai makes sense, but the direct translation of what sounds a bit harsh in English.
Yeah, I know, right? So yeah, that's one of the things, like this kind of deep understanding between about relationship between people may be a little difficult for children to understand.
Yeah. Now, have you heard of the AUA, the American University Alumni Association? They had an English course a Thai course in Thailand for years and years and years. And a good friend of mine actually used to manage it. And I was never really on board with their process. And the process, as I understand it, was that you would show up to their class and you would just sit there and listen for however many weeks it was before you were allowed to talk. And this always struck me as really suspect. That definitely would not work for me.
So you start to learn like a child.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen
exactly.
A lot.
But you're not a child, you're an adult. And I think you have the capability, like you said, to take those new words and start using them in different contexts.
Yeah, definitely. Also for adults, you have the help of your native language as well. Like you just talked about mango. So for kids in order to learn about mango, they probably need to smell it, eat it, touch it. But for adult, I tell you, mamuang is mango. You don't need to go through all those kinds of activities. Right. You know what it is.
Right. So we can automatically assign a color and a shape and a taste to it.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas kids just poop their pants and start crying.
They need time.
Yeah. So you are a Thai teacher too.
Yes.
And you teach advanced Thai? Is that mostly advanced Thai?
Well, mostly it's beginners, but recently I have been teaching advanced and I find it very interesting.
How come?
Well, because first of all, there aren't many materials or impressions of how people teach advanced students because most people start as a beginner, and when you reach intermediate or upper beginner level, many people give up. So there aren't many materials you can find for advanced teaching. And also secondly, because I think there are some strategies for advanced students that are different from beginners. Like if for me, I would consider myself speaking English as probably like upper intermediate or near advanced. And I notice myself as well, like when I speak English, there are ways that I can get around. Like I can keep the communication going, but actually I'm not saying what I really want to say. Like I can't find the words that I want to say, something like that. And I think one of the point of advanced teaching is to get to those problems. Like sometimes they can get around, but I want to teach them like extra words, the words that can help them achieve like what they really want. So it's kind of different from beginner teaching, I think.
Yes, I feel the same way with Thai, because oftentimes I will say like, okay, I want to say this in Thai, da, 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 da. And I figure it out in my head. Okay, you say this and this and this. I'm pretty sure that's right. And then I'll hear a Thai person say the exact same sentence, the same meaning, but use completely different words. And it's really frustrating. It's like, because you're like, oh God, like I wanted to say it and I think I was going to be successful, but there's so many different ways to say the same thing.
Yeah. So one of the things for the advanced, in addition to being able to touch on different topics, is that you can find like the exact thing, or being like speaking in a culturally appropriate way. Yeah, I think.
Right. Like when I say alaiwa, I copy my Thai friends and they say, you can't say that. You said that.
There are different standards.
Yeah, apparently. So when you teach this, for instance, say if you were teaching a beginner's class and then, your beginner's class finished at 1 p.m. and then at 1 p.m. you had an advanced learner's class, how would you need to adjust the way you think about what you're about to teach and your lessons? Would it really be different in how you approached your teaching style?
Well, first of all, the teaching style main difference is that for advanced students, I use Thai to teach Thai. So all the explanation, everything, all interactions in the class is in Thai. So that's kind of mind shift a little bit. Like it's a shift a little bit. So I'm in a Thai context now, and it's good for them as well to listen to Thai. every time, like all the time during the class. And yeah, because we do some lesson planning. So I'll need to go through like everything one more time in order to like familiarize with the difficulty or the text that I'm going to teach. So yes, we need to do some shift.
Yeah. What are your lessons like for advanced learners? Like what do you teach them? Do you teach them reading out of a book, or do you teach them role playing or things like that?
Yeah, so I try to include a combination of different things, but my number one rule for picking what to teach for the advanced students is that the material needs to be authentic. So it has to be something created by Thai people for Thai people, not created by Thai people for foreigners. It's kind of different, right? For beginners, textbooks, of course, they are created for learners, and there are like explanations, and it's like a long way of sifting through the grammar points and vocabulary, etc. But for advanced students, I use like sometimes it's an article online, but for articles online, for online stuff, sometimes we need to do some editing for like typos and or punctuation, those kind of stuff. But I try to keep them minimal. And we also do podcasts. There are quite a few Thai podcasts that are very good. So I let them listen to the podcast, and then we do the discussion or extended practice during the classroom. So their work is not light. So they need to read if it's like a text, then they need to read beforehand. If it's a podcast or videos, then they need to watch or listen beforehand, and then we do extended practice during the classroom.
Right. And you mentioned that you like to use a lot of like comedy material, pop culture material as well. Why is that?
Well, first of all, I think pop culture and comedy is interesting. It's like, it doesn't feel like learning for students somehow, because we probably noticed that out of the classroom, actually the students, they watch Thai movies by themselves, even though it's not required. They watch Thai series. So when it's entertainment, it doesn't feel like learning. It's just like when at work, you would say, do what you love and you will never work a day in your life. Just something like that. So I try to find something that they enjoy. That's one of the reasons. And another reason is that there are so many linguistic and cultural references in pop culture and comedy materials.
That's right. We'll get into that in more detail in a second, but I totally get what you're saying, because like, a lot of these Thai textbooks are pretty dry, Somchai goes to the market and he buys some fruit or whatever, but I would much rather, like, Greg, explain the plot of the Simpsons episode in Thai. Like that for me would be a really interesting challenge. And I would respond very well to that, I think, but it's this sort of dry material that's been around for 100 years that is really kind of a slog to get through.
Yeah, indeed. I guess book is good in terms of it's there. You can write it once and it's always there. Yeah. But for this kind of like, for example, the comedy and stuff, one is that the cultural and linguistic reference, sometimes they change as well. So it's related to time, and it probably require more preparation from the teacher side. So I guess that's probably one of the reasons why it's not that prevalent.
That's right. And I think not a lot of Thai teachers would have time or the inclination to go and sit down and watch a bunch of Simpsons episodes so they could understand what, the student is talking about.
Indeed.
Let's talk more about pop culture, because when we were discussing your coming on the show, we had a really interesting conversation about the nuances of a culture and how they react to and how they relate to pop culture. And Ed, my co-host, and I have said on the show many times before that if you really want to understand a language, you need to understand the culture, and especially the pop culture of that country, of the language you're trying to learn. It just there's so much shorthand and slang and jokes and references that get thrown around, just like in English. that are really hard to get if you don't understand the culture of Thailand, because we're talking about learning Thai.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a really interesting story about a snake. I thought it was fascinating. Let's get into that.
Yeah, definitely. So this is one of the skit from a comedy show that I found, and I used it in the advanced lesson as well. So basically in the story there is a man and a woman, and the man was trying to go after the woman. So in Thai, well, when I told this story to you, you said that it's a little creepy to mention that you dreamt of her. But in Thai, it seems like okay to say that you dream of a woman to mean that you miss her or to think of her.
Right. So in the story, this guy had a dream about the woman.
Yeah.
And he told her, right?
He told her. Yeah. He told her that he dreamt about her. And what's interesting is that in the dream, so he dreamt of a snake and it slithered in and it wrapped her. It wrapped her up. And then he was kind of like he did a heroic act and he went on and killed the snake.
Right. Okay.
So here there is some references or some cultural background. So first of all, to say that you think of someone by saying that you have dreamt of someone, it sounds quite okay to Thai people. So really? I think that's one of the reference. Yeah. I think it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you walked up to a colleague in an American or Western office and said, "Hey, I had a dream about you last night," I mean, alarm bells would be going off. Like, okay,
really?
This is weird. And
really?
Yeah, that's not something you would do.
Interesting. Yeah.
But in Thai, it's like, oh, you're thinking about me. Ooh, that's a bit romantic.
Yeah, indeed. Especially in terms of like the romantic side. And so I guess this is kind of like the first cultural difference. And the second one is about the snake, like slithering in. So, and wrapping her up. So in Thai, we have so many superstitions, as you may notice, but one of one of the very widespread one is that, well, actually, if a woman dreams that she is wrapped by a snake, it means that she will meet a soulmate. It's kind of like one of the very, important interpretation of dreams in Thai.
That is not how most Western women would interpret being squeezed by a snake. That would probably, because I mean, the guy saying, "Hey, there's a snake wrapping you up, and I busted in and I attacked that snake to save you. I'm the hero." That's the interpretation that the Westerner would have.
Yeah. So the heroic act is one of them as well, but I guess the main one, the more important one, is that you are meeting a soulmate who is me, kind of like that.
Whoa, wow.
Yeah, and the ending is also interesting. So actually in this story, the woman is not much interested in the guy, or maybe she hasn't paid attention to him. She paid attention to something else. So after he killed the snake, she interpreted the whole dream as telling her about the lottery number. Because, another interpretation, major interpretation of the dreams in Thailand is whether it tells you some numbers so you can buy the lottery, right? So she interprets the slithering of the snake as number 8, because it's kind of like left, right, circling.
The snake is like goes in, and the snake slithers in the number 8.
Yes, it's number 8. And then this one is linguistically related. So he said that the snake eventually died. So die, of course, you can say tai in Thai, right? But in order to make it rhyme, or in order to make it a homophone, in the story, he used the word sun, which is like sun sia, kind of lost, gone. Sap sun, is part of the word. So sun can mean gone. And sun, it's a homophone of the number 0, right? Number 0 is also soon. So she said, okay, so that means 80. I'll go buy a lottery with the number 80, ending at 0.
It's so fascinating. Okay, so just to sum up. So a dude has a dream about a snake attacking a woman, and he busts in and kills a snake. For a foreign audience, they would think that like the woman was being attacked, she was in danger, and the man dreamed about being the hero and saving her. For the Thai person, the woman is meeting her soulmate, or someone is thinking about her in that way, and she also sees it as a good omen that she should go out and buy a lottery ticket for the number 80.
Yes.
Is that roughly right?
Yes.
I mean, it's so different. There's two completely different interpretations of that.
Yeah, isn't it?
Right. So, I mean, if you were describing that, if I was describing that dream in Thai, I would probably use words like, antalai, danger, I came in and I saved you and things like that. But I need to understand that if I was describing this dream to a Thai audience, the tone of how I described it, the words that I used would all need to be different.
Yeah, or the parts that you emphasize, like it's wrapping you, it's squeezing you.
It's squeezing you with love rather than attacking you to kill you and eat you.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that's a really good example, right? Like, this very simple thing can be completely misinterpreted based on just cultural nuance.
Yeah, definitely. And there are like both cultural and linguistics reference as well, like the number soon. Yeah, so another one is also related to the language and culture. So you know that kids are adorable. You have a kid, and especially
okay, let's just say they're adorable.
He was a baby.
Most of the time, yeah.
Most of the time, yeah. So when you see like cute babies in Thailand, what do you say to the baby or to the parents?
Say narak.
Narak, right? And that's kind of like the standard. Like I would tend to, I would say I would have a gut feeling to say that as well. And if I was in like foreign cultures, I would not be afraid to say like the baby is cute. But actually in Thai culture, it's kind of a little taboo to say to a kid or parents that the kid is cute. Because we have some superstition again, that if you say that a kid is cute, then a ghost will know that too, and the ghost will take the baby away.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so that's why maybe around your kid, it depends, because sometimes people know that you are from a different culture, so they don't do much of the Thai thing. But among Thai people, many people would say that the kid isน่ารักน่าชัง. So น่ารัก, means cute or adorable, but น่าชัง actually means unpleasant. ชัง actually means hate. So it's like, I love to hate it. So น่ารักน่าชังis like adorable but unpleasant. So in this way, the ghost will not notice the kid and will not take the kid away.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I cannot imagine the face of a parent in Canada if I walked up and said, your baby is adorable but unpleasant.
Yeah. And some people like even went a step further and just say like น่าเกลียด น่าชัง, like ugly and unpleasant. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, if you are Thai people, then they will not react too harshly on that, because we know that this is not intended. And sometimes we say that with a smile, but the words that come out of your mouth is ugly.
Wow, that's interesting. I've never heard that before. And I'm trying to think back of what people said to my kid. Maybe he just wasn't that narak. I don't know. I can't remember. No, he was a pretty cute kid. What about when you walk up to a baby and you go like, "Boom pui," and you poke them or something?
Oh, I say.
Actually, people come up to me and say that sometimes too. It means chubby.
You mean like you or your kid? Yourself?
Both. Fun. This is a bit of a detour, but I had an ex-girlfriend one time, and she used to call me Toi Noi.
Oh, Toi Noi.
Toi Noi, which means like chubby, but
fat,
cute. But cute or something like that. And she eventually got used to using it so much that we'd go to a restaurant or something, and she'd be like, Toi Noi, what do you want? And the waiter would be like, stop calling me Toi Noi.
Yeah, I know, right? Because, well, this is another thing. It might not be language related, but this is definitely the culture. In Thai, you can say like, you can talk about the shape of a person, like whether they are a little chubby, etc., or like whether they are a little short, you can use those terms in an affectionate way, like the intention of your girlfriend. I'm sure that she was trying to be affectionate, but sometimes for foreigners, when you say I'm chubby, it sounds a little weird.
Yeah. And that's a big issue that I think, I mean, we're getting off into a different topic here, but that's probably one of the most difficult issues that foreigners have to deal with when they first come here, is just the absolute blunt directness that Thai people have about how you look. And I mean, I'll use me again as an example because it's my show. But when I first started teaching here, I started teaching at a high school around November. And as I was being led around to being introduced to all the teachers in my department, almost all of them said like, "Oh, great, you can play Santa because you're fat." And I'd been in Thailand for like, 4 months or something. And I'm like, "Oh, wow." It took me a long time to realize that they meant it as a compliment. Like, you can play this role so well. We're excited about this. This is great to have you here. Whereas in Canada, I would probably get punched in the face if I'd said that.
Indeed, yeah. And sometimes it's just like it's unnoticed among Thai people. We just like say it naturally, not noticing that it might offend somebody.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think, I mean, as foreigners, we are in Thailand, and to expect Thai people to adapt to our culture is ridiculous. So I think it's important that, if we are trying to learn Thai, that we also try to understand the cultural side of the language too, not just the grammatical side of it, because they kind of complement each other.
Indeed.
Well, Nan, what we do with our $5 patrons is we give them a heads up when we have some guests coming on the show. And I have a couple of questions here from our buddy Mike. And as we were just talking about this, he said he wanted me to ask, when you talked about how understanding a culture helps you understand a language, Nan, what are your thoughts on how learning a language helps you understand the culture?
I think definitely there is a relationship to that, because language and culture are like two sides of the same coin. You can't separate them apart. Right. And what I can think of now is that there are so many Thai words that are related to Jai, like the heart.
Sure.
And yeah, I think it kind of, if you understand the words, the language, then it kind of help you understand a little bit about how Thai people think, the logic of Thai people. For example, I think a very classic one is like Greng Jai.
Greng Jai, of course, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the concepts that is pretty difficult to explain to foreigners, or at least translate to a foreign language. But if you take it apart, the language, and Jai is something related to the heart, and Greng maybe Greng has a meaning of a little like scared or taken back. Is kind of the meaning behind Greng. So Greng Jai is like you are being considerate. You think about you think for someone, and you do not want to offend that person. So that's why you kind of like you take yourself back a little bit. So right. I think, yeah, this helps understand like the culture or how we use like Greng Jai.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think also, I mean, I when you learn, like Na Dam, or, then you have to understand that Thais don't like dark skin, and they attribute a whole sort of negative aura around that. And there's language built up around that as well. So it very much goes back and forth, and they both bounce off of each other.
Indeed.
And another question from Mike, he said, what's your take on the most challenging aspects of learning the Thai language? For me, it would be the tones. And I got to say, Mike, I'm on board, man. I agree. Those tones are killer. And there are days when I am trying to learn something, and I am convinced that hundreds of years ago, Thai people got around a campfire and were like, look, we're going to make this impossible for foreigners to learn. And not only that, we're going to make it so that if you say the wrong tone, you're going to sound really talung, like very dirty. And for instance, like I tell Thai people at another time, I say, the word glai is very close to the word glai. And a lot of times they're like, oh, yeah, I guess it is. And I'm like, you guess. I mean, it's clear that they're very similar. So I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, but as you teach your students, what are some of the most difficult elements for them to learn?
Well, I say, of course, Mike, I understand your difficulty. And I think for people who come from the background without tones are definitely one of the most difficult ones. But, well, I have to say that some of my students, they come from backgrounds with tones, like Chinese. In Chinese language, they have tones. So actually, it might not be like the universal difficulty among all learners.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I would say another thing though, and I don't mean to say that tones aren't difficult, but giving another example, I think, well, it's actually vocabulary, and the intricate or the subtle meanings behind words. It's just like grain dye that we just talked before. There are so many notions or concepts that are difficult to understand. And back to what we did in the main interview, there are so many like cultural references in that that you need to understand in order to understand the word. Also, another thing about vocabulary is that, because if you notice, actually the Thai sentence is not that complex. Like you have subject, verb, object, and you don't really have like the inflection, like the in English SED kind of like that. So actually, you probably don't get that much of a clue from other parts of the language. And that puts more emphasis or more importance to the vocabulary or how you arrange the sentence.
Oh, I see. Okay. So because there's not a lot of subtle nuance in how you can modify the words, you have to choose the words correctly, more carefully.
Yeah, that's my impression.
Interesting. All right. Thanks for sending those in, Mike. Well, Nan, that was super interesting. I know you're busy. I don't want to keep you too long, but thank you so much for coming on the show. And I highly recommend listening to her podcast, listeners. It's great. And certainly hope that it'll help me, especially now, because before the pandemic, I was taking Thai lessons twice a week. And I was making some progress. I was shocked. But now, of course, I'm stuck at home forever and I can't take the Thai lessons anymore. So there's definitely a backslide for me. But now there's great resources online, one of them being your podcast. Where can people find out more about that or more about you?
Yeah, so my podcast is called You Too Can Learn Thai, and it's available almost everywhere. I think everywhere you listen to podcasts, so like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major platforms, or you can visit youtoocanlearnthai.com.